The belt cut through the frozen air before it struck her face, and Hannah James tasted blood as she fell against the rough wooden floor of their Virginia homestead. The January cold of 1875 seeping through the planks beneath her cheek. Her father stood over her, his face twisted with rage and something worse, disappointment that had curdled into hatred over the 3 days since she had refused to marry Thomas Whitmore, the banker's son from Williamsburg who smelled of pomade and spoke to her like she was livestock to be acquired. "You will marry him," her father said, his voice low and dangerous. "I have given my word, and you will not make a liar of me." Hannah pushed herself up on trembling arms, her vision swimming. Through the window, she could see snow falling in thick curtains across their property, covering the bare trees and the fence posts in white. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and since then, her father had become someone she no longer recognized. The drink had taken hold of him, and the debts had piled up, and now he had sold her future to clear his conscience and his accounts. "I will not marry a man I do not love," she whispered, though every word hurt her split lip. At 20 years old, she had worked this land beside him, had kept the house, had done everything a dutiful daughter should do. But this she could not do. The belt rose again, and Hannah closed her eyes, waiting for the blow. It never came. "Drop it." The voice came from the doorway, deep and steady, with an edge of steel beneath the calm. Hannah opened her eyes to see a tall figure silhouetted against the white landscape beyond, snow dusting his broad shoulders and the brim of his hat. Her father turned, the belt still raised, his face flushing darker. "This is my house and my daughter," her father snarled. "Get out." "No." The man stepped inside, and Hannah could see him clearly now. He was young, perhaps 25, with dark eyes that held no fear and a jaw set with determination. She recognized him from town, Nathan Owens, the cowboy who had driven cattle through Williamsburg last fall and had stayed on at the Morrison Ranch outside town. He had spoken to her once at the Mercantile, had tipped his hat and asked her opinion on which coffee beans were best, had listened to her answer like it mattered. "Nathan," she breathed, not understanding why he was here, how he had known. "I heard you were in trouble," he said, his eyes not leaving her father. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson," she was worried, said she heard shouting for days now. Hannah's father laughed, a bitter sound. "So you thought you would ride in here like some kind of hero? She is promised to another man." "The arrangements are made." "Arrangements she did not agree to," Nathan said quietly. He moved further into the room, and Hannah could see the tension in his frame, coiled and ready. "Miss James, do you want to marry this banker's son?" "No," Hannah said, finding her voice stronger now. "I do not." "Then you do not have to." Nathan looked at her father. "No law says a woman has to marry against her will. You can beat her all you like, but it will not change that." Her father's face went purple. "I will have you arrested for trespassing. For kidnapping, I will see you hanged." "You could try," Nathan said. "But I think the sheriff might be interested in why your daughter's face is bleeding and why Mrs. Patterson has heard you threatening to lock her in the cellar until she agrees to your terms." He paused. "I think a lot of people in Williamsburg would be interested in that." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the howl of wind outside and the creak of the old house settling. Hannah's father lowered the belt slowly, his hand shaking. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options. "Get out," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Both of you. If you leave, you are no daughter of mine. You get nothing. No dowry, no inheritance, nothing." Hannah pushed herself to her feet, her legs unsteady. Her cheek throbbed where the belt had struck, and she could feel the welt rising. But she lifted her chin and looked her father in the eye. "I never asked for anything but kindness," she said, "and you could not even give me that." She walked past him, past Nathan, into her small room off the main living area. Her hands shook as she gathered her few possessions: her mother's silver brush, the quilt her grandmother had made, a change of clothes, her mother's Bible. Everything else she left behind. When she emerged, Nathan was waiting by the door, his horse stamping in the snow outside, another horse beside it, a gentle mare that Hannah recognized from the Morrison ranch. "I brought her for you," Nathan said. "If you wanted to leave. You were that certain I would come with you?" Hannah asked, pulling on her heavy coat, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. "I was that certain you deserved the choice," Nathan replied. Her father had collapsed into his chair by the cold fireplace, his head in his hands. He did not look up as they left, did not say goodbye, did not call her back. Hannah felt something break inside her chest as she stepped out into the storm, but it was not entirely grief. It was also relief, sharp and painful as the winter air. Nathan helped her onto the mare, his hands gentle and steady. "Can you ride in this?" he asked, looking up at her with concern. "The snow is getting heavier." "Where are we going?" Hannah asked, gathering the reins. "Away from here," Nathan said. "I have a cabin about 10 miles north, up in the hills. We can shelter there until the storm passes, and then we can figure out what comes next." Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. Nathan mounted his own horse, a big black gelding that seemed unfazed by the weather, and they set off into the blizzard. The world disappeared into white within minutes. Hannah could barely see Nathan's form ahead of her, could barely see her own hands on the reins. The snow stung her face, collecting in her eyelashes and on her coat. The cold was brutal, seeping through her layers and into her bones. Her mare followed Nathan's gelding faithfully, and Hannah clung to the saddle, trying not to think about how far they still had to go. Time became meaningless. There was only the snow and the cold and the steady movement of the horse beneath her. Her face went numb, and she could not feel her fingers anymore. She thought about letting go, about sliding from the saddle into the soft white drifts, about just giving up. "Hannah." Nathan's voice cut through the wind. "Stay with me. We are almost there." She lifted her head, trying to focus. Through the curtain of snow, she could just make out a darker shape ahead, a structure of some kind. Nathan dismounted and came back to her, reaching up to help her down. Her legs would not hold her, and she collapsed against him. He caught her easily, his arm around her waist. "I have got you," he said into her ear. "Just a few more steps." He half carried her to the cabin, pushing the door open with his shoulder. Inside was dark and cold, but it was shelter from the wind and snow. Nathan settled her on a bench by the wall and moved quickly, efficiently, lighting a lantern, building a fire in the stone fireplace. Hannah watched through heavy-lidded eyes, her body shaking uncontrollably now that they had stopped moving. Once the fire was crackling, Nathan went back outside. Hannah heard him moving around, heard the horses being led to what must be a small barn or shelter. He was gone for what felt like forever, and Hannah huddled closer to the growing fire, holding her numb hands toward the flames. When Nathan finally returned, snow-covered and breathing hard, he barred the door behind him and came directly to her. "Let me see your face," he said, crouching down in front of her. Hannah turned toward him, and his expression darkened as he took in the damage. Her cheek was swollen, the cut from the belt buckle still seeping blood. Her lip was split, and bruises were forming along her jaw. "I am going to kill him," Nathan said quietly. "No," Hannah said, "you are not. Because then I would be alone and you would be in jail or worse, and what good would that do either of us?" Nathan exhaled slowly, his jaw clenching. "He had no right, I know." Hannah's voice broke. "But it is done now. I am here and I cannot go back." Nathan reached up, his fingers gentle as he touched the edge of the bruise on her cheek. "I am sorry I did not come sooner. Mrs. Patterson, she only told me today what she had been hearing. I should have checked on you before now." "You could not have known," Hannah said. "And you came. That is what matters." Nathan stood and moved to a cupboard, pulling out cloths and a bottle. "This is going to sting," he warned, dampening a cloth with what smelled like whiskey. He cleaned the cut carefully, his touch light despite his rough, work-hardened hands. Hannah watched his face as he worked, seeing the concentration there, the anger still simmering beneath the surface, but also something else. Tenderness. "Why did you come for me?" she asked softly. "We barely know each other." Nathan paused, the cloth still pressed to her cheek. His dark eyes met hers. "Last fall, when I first came to Williamsburg with the cattle drive, I saw you in town. You were carrying a basket of eggs, and you stopped to help an old man who had dropped his parcels in the street. You did not just pick them up. You talked to him, made sure he was all right, carried them to his wagon for him. And when he tried to give you a coin for your trouble, you refused." Hannah remembered that day, remembered old Mr. Henderson and his shaking hands. "I asked around about you after that," Nathan continued. "Found out your name, found out you lived with your father outside town. I wanted to talk to you, but I am just a cowboy, and you seemed like you deserved better than that. Then I saw you at the Mercantile a few weeks later, and you smiled at me when I asked about the coffee, and I thought maybe I had a chance." He lowered the cloth, his hand dropping away. "I was working up the courage to call on you properly, to ask your father if I could court you, when I heard from Mrs. Patterson today. She said your father was trying to force you to marry Whitmore, that she had heard him threatening you, heard you crying. I knew I had to do something." Hannah felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You risked a lot for someone you barely know." "Maybe I wanted to know you better," Nathan said simply. "And maybe I could not stand the thought of someone hurting you." They stayed up most of the night, huddled by the fire while the storm raged outside. Nathan found blankets and food, simple fare of dried beef and hardtack, but Hannah ate gratefully. They talked quietly, sharing stories of their lives. Nathan told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, about working his way north, driving cattle, learning the land. Hannah told him about her mother, about the woman who had been kind and gentle and who had taught Hannah to read, to think for herself, about how her father had changed after the death, how the grief had poisoned him. "He was not always like this," Hannah said, staring into the flames. "When I was little, he used to laugh. He would toss me in the air and catch me, and I felt like I was flying. Mother would scold him, say he would drop me, but he never did." She wiped at her eyes. "I do not know when I lost that father. It was not all at once. It was gradual, like watching something rust." Nathan reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "You do not have to explain him or excuse him. What he did to you was wrong, Hannah. No amount of grief or debt justifies that." "I know," she whispered. "But it still hurts to know he chose money over me." "Then he is a fool," Nathan said firmly. "And you are better off without him." As the night wore on, Hannah found herself leaning against Nathan's shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking her. She felt him shift, felt him wrap his arm around her carefully, mindful of her injuries. "Sleep," he murmured. "You are safe here, I promise." And for the first time in days, Hannah believed it. She woke to pale winter sunlight streaming through the cabin's small window. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside pristine and silent beneath a heavy blanket of snow. Nathan was already up, stoking the fire, and he smiled when he saw her stirring. "How do you feel?" he asked. Hannah took inventory. Her face still ached and her body was stiff and sore, but she felt more rested than she had in weeks. "Better," she said. "Thank you." Nathan brought her coffee, real coffee that he must have been saving, hot and strong and perfect. They ate a simple breakfast, and then Nathan went to check on the horses while Hannah cleaned up the cabin as best she could with her limited mobility. When Nathan returned, his expression was serious. "The snow is deep, but the sky is clear. We need to talk about what happens next." Hannah nodded, setting down the cup she had been washing. "I cannot go back. Even if I wanted to, which I do not, my father made it clear I am not welcome." "I would not let you go back to that," Nathan said. "But you need somewhere to stay, somewhere safe." He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "The Morrison Ranch, the one I work at, they have a big house. Mrs. Morrison might take you on as help, let you stay there until you figure out what you want to do." Hannah studied him, seeing the careful way he was not looking at her. "Is that what you want? To take me to the ranch and leave me there?" "No," Nathan admitted, "but I do not want you to feel obligated to me either. You just escaped one man trying to control your life. I will not be another." Hannah crossed to him, her heart pounding. "What if I want to stay with you?" Nathan's eyes snapped to hers, searching. "Hannah, you do not have to say that. You do not owe me anything." "I know I do not owe you," Hannah said. "But last night, talking with you, feeling safe for the first time in so long, that meant something to me. You mean something to me." She took a shaky breath. "I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I would like the chance to change that if you would." Nathan reached up, cupping her uninjured cheek with his hand. "I would like that more than anything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I want you to be sure, I do not have much to offer. This cabin, my work at the ranch, it is not fancy or comfortable." "I do not want fancy," Hannah said. "I want honest, I want kind. I want someone who sees me as a person, not property." She covered his hand with hers. "I want you, Nathan Owens, if you will have me." He kissed her then, gentle and careful of her split lip, and Hannah felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower toward the sun. This was what she had been refusing to give to Thomas Whitmore, this feeling of rightness, of choice, of wanting and being wanted in return. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan was smiling, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something young and joyful. "Then you will stay," he said. "We will figure it out together." The next weeks passed in a strange, dreamlike quality. The snow kept them isolated at the cabin, and Nathan proved to be as good as his word. He never pushed her, never demanded anything, but instead gave her space to heal, both physically and emotionally. He taught her to play cards, and she taught him the songs her mother had loved. They cooked together over the fire, simple meals that tasted better than anything Hannah remembered eating at her father's table. At night, they slept on opposite sides of the cabin, Nathan on the floor near the fire and Hannah on the narrow bed, though Hannah found herself wishing he was closer. She liked the sound of his breathing in the dark, like knowing he was there. As her bruises faded and her split lip healed, Hannah found herself watching Nathan more, noticing the way his hands moved when he worked, the way he spoke gently to the horses, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She caught that look one morning as she was braiding her hair, saw the longing in his eyes before he quickly looked away. "Nathan," she said softly. He looked back at her, wariness in his expression. "Yes, come here." He crossed to her slowly, and Hannah reached out, taking his hand and pulling him down to sit beside her on the bed. "I am healed now," she said. "My face does not hurt anymore." "That is good," Nathan said, though his voice was strained. "Which means you can kiss me properly," Hannah said, feeling bold and terrified and exhilarated all at once. "If you want to." "Hannah, I do not want to rush you," she cut him off by pressing her lips to his, and this time there was no gentleness, no holding back. Nathan made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, his hands spanning her waist. Hannah wound her arms around his neck, kissing him with all the pent-up feeling of the past weeks, all her gratitude and growing affection and desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered. "I do not know if it is too soon to say that, but it is true." "It is not too soon," Hannah said, her heart soaring. "Because I am falling in love with you too." By the time the snow melted enough for travel, Hannah and Nathan had become inseparable. They rode together down to the Morrison Ranch, where Nathan spoke privately with Mr. Morrison, the ranch owner. Hannah waited nervously, not sure what Nathan was saying, what he was arranging. When Nathan emerged from the ranch house, he was grinning. "Mr. Morrison says I can have that plot of land on the east edge of the property, the one with the creek. Says if I am willing to build on it and work it, it is mine. He will pay me fair wages for my ranch work, and what I grow on my own land is my own." "Nathan, that is wonderful," Hannah exclaimed. "It means I can build us a house," Nathan said, taking her hands. "A real house, not just a cabin. It means I can offer you a real future." He dropped to one knee right there in the ranch yard, not caring who might be watching. "Hannah James, I know we have not been together long, but I know my own heart. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me?" Hannah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Williamsburg, with Mrs. Morrison standing as witness and several of Nathan's friends from the ranch in attendance. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Morrison had helped her make, and Nathan wore his best shirt and a new vest. Hannah's father did not come, did not even respond to the invitation Nathan had insisted they send. "It is his loss," Nathan said as they stood on the church steps after the ceremony, Hannah's hand in his. "Not yours." Hannah squeezed his fingers. "I know," she said, and she did. She had grieved the father she lost, but she would not let his absence poison her happiness. That spring and summer, they built their house together. Nathan did most of the heavy work, but Hannah helped where she could, learning to mix mortar and fit shingles. Their neighbors from the surrounding ranches came to help with the barn raising, and Hannah cooked for them, serving hearty meals and getting to know the community that would be hers. The house was small but well made, with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. Nathan built Hannah a real kitchen with a good stove, and he made her a table from oak, sturdy and beautiful. She planted a garden, vegetables and flowers both, and tended it carefully through the hot Virginia summer. At night, they lay together in their new bed, windows open to catch the breeze, and talked about their dreams. Nathan wanted to expand their land eventually, maybe run some cattle of his own. Hannah wanted to start a lending library in town, wanted to help other women learn to read the way her mother had taught her. "We can do all of it," Nathan said, holding her close. "We have time." By the time autumn came and the leaves turned gold and red across the hills, Hannah knew she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch he had built, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Nathan's face went through a series of emotions so quickly Hannah almost laughed. Shock, then joy, then fear, then joy again. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby, we are," Hannah confirmed, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "In the spring, I think." "April or May." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "Hannah, I promise I will be a good father. I will never raise my hand to our child. I will never make them feel like they have to earn my love." "I know," Hannah said, tears in her eyes again. "I know you will be wonderful." The winter of 1876 was milder than the one before, and Hannah spent it preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, reading every book on childbirth she could find. Nathan hovered, protective and nervous, making sure she did not overexert herself. Mrs. Morrison became a good friend, coming to visit regularly and sharing her own experiences with her 4 children. "Labor is hard," she said bluntly. "Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying, but it is worth it. Every bit of pain is worth it when you hold your baby for the first time." Hannah went into labor on a warm April morning, just as the apple trees Nathan had planted were beginning to bloom. Mrs. Morrison came to help, along with the local midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in the county. Nathan paced outside, unable to sit still, until Mrs. Morrison finally took pity on him and led him into the bedroom to hold Hannah's hand. Hannah gripped his fingers so hard she thought she might break them, but Nathan never complained, never left her side. "You can do this," he murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You are the strongest person I know." It took hours, painful and exhausting hours, but finally, as the sun began to set, Hannah heard the thin, reedy cry of her baby. Mrs. Chen cleaned and wrapped the infant quickly, then placed the bundle in Hannah's arms. "A boy," she said, smiling. "A healthy, strong boy." Hannah looked down at her son's red, wrinkled face and felt her heart expand so much she thought it might burst. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fingers that gripped her thumb when she offered it. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, little one." "Welcome to the world." Nathan was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "He is beautiful," he said hoarsely. "Hannah, he is perfect." They named him James after Hannah's mother's maiden name, and he became the center of their world. Nathan was a devoted father, waking in the night to bring the baby to Hannah for feeding, walking him when he was fussy, singing him nonsense songs in his deep voice that somehow always soothed him. Hannah watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love with him. This was the man who had saved her, who had given her a home and a family, who had shown her what love was supposed to be. One day, when James was about 6 months old and beginning to sit up on his own, a wagon came up the road toward their house. Hannah was in the garden with the baby when she saw it, and her heart sank when she recognized the driver. Thomas Whitmore, the banker's son she had been meant to marry, pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, his expensive clothes looking out of place against their simple farmstead. Nathan emerged from the barn, his hand moving reflexively to the gun at his hip before he caught himself. "Can I help you?" he called, his voice cold. Thomas ignored him, looking directly at Hannah. "Miss James, I heard you were out here. I wanted to speak with you." "It is Mrs. Owens now," Hannah said, standing and picking up James, holding him protectively against her shoulder. "And I have nothing to say to you." "Your father is dead," Thomas said bluntly. "He drank himself into a stupor 2 weeks ago and did not wake up. Since you are his only living relative, his property passes to you." Hannah felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Her father was dead. The man who had beaten her, who had tried to sell her into a loveless marriage, who had chosen money and pride over his own daughter. He was gone. She waited for the grief to come, but all she felt was a distant sadness for the man he had been once, before the drink and the bitterness. "I see," she said quietly. "I have the deed here," Thomas continued, pulling papers from his coat. "The property is not worth much. The house is in disrepair and there are still debts against it, but it is yours if you want it." Nathan moved to stand beside Hannah, his presence solid and comforting. "Do you want it?" he asked her softly. Hannah looked at the papers, at the proof of her father's life reduced to legal documents and debts. She thought about that house where she had grown up, where her mother had died, where her father had raised his belt against her. She thought about the fear and pain she had felt there. Then she looked at her own home, at the house she and Nathan had built together, at her husband standing beside her and their son in her arms. She looked at the garden she had planted, at the life she had created, and she knew what her answer was. "Sell it," she said. "Use whatever money there is to settle his debts. I do not want it." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain it could provide?" "I am certain," Hannah interrupted. "I have everything I need right here." Thomas shrugged, tucking the papers away. "Very well, I will handle the sale." He climbed back into his wagon, then paused. "For what it is worth, I heard what happened, what your father did. I am sorry." "Are you sorry it happened, or are you sorry you did not get what you paid for?" Hannah asked evenly. Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "I suppose I deserved that." He gathered the reins. "Goodbye, Mrs. Owens. I wish you well." They watched him drive away, and then Nathan took James from Hannah's arms, settling the baby against his shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. Hannah leaned into her husband's side, feeling his free arm come around her. "I am," she said, and realized it was true. "He was my father, and I am sad he died alone and bitter, but I cannot grieve what we never truly had." "He missed out on knowing you," Nathan said. "On knowing his grandson. That is his tragedy, not yours." Over the next years, their life continued to grow and flourish. Their land prospered, and Nathan's work with the Morrison Ranch earned them a steady income. When James was 3, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. 2 years after that came another son, Robert, who was quieter than his siblings but possessed a gentle kindness that reminded Hannah of her own mother. Hannah started her lending library in town, using one room of the church and gathering donated books from anyone who would contribute. She taught reading to children and adults alike, and found joy in watching people discover the magic of stories and knowledge. Nathan supported her fully, watching the children when she had to be in town, proud of his wife's intelligence and drive. Their house expanded as their family did, Nathan building new rooms with the help of their neighbors. The community they had become part of felt like family in a way Hannah's blood relatives never had. There were barn dances and church socials, harvest festivals and Christmas celebrations. There were hard times too, droughts and harsh winters and sickness, but they faced it all together. One evening, nearly 10 years after that snowy night when Nathan had saved her, Hannah stood on their porch watching her children play in the yard. James was 12 now, tall and serious, helping his father mend a fence. Catherine was 7, fearless and bright, climbing a tree despite her mother's protests. Robert was 5, sitting in the grass and showing something to his father, some insect or stone he had found fascinating. Nathan caught her watching and smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip. He said something to the children and then walked over to her, pulling her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "How lucky I am," Hannah said. "How different my life could have been if you had not come for me that night." "I will always come for you," Nathan said. "Though I am grateful you have not needed rescuing since then." Hannah laughed. "I do not need rescuing anymore. I have you, and I have our children, and I have a life I chose. That is more than I ever dreamed of having." "I am the lucky one," Nathan countered. "I get to wake up every morning next to the woman I love in a house we built together, surrounded by our family. How many men can say that?" Hannah turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him properly. Their children made exaggerated gagging noises from the yard, and they both laughed, breaking apart. "Come on," Nathan said, taking her hand. "Let us go see what Robert found. He says it is an arrowhead, but I think it might just be a rock." "It is definitely just a rock," Hannah said, but she went with him anyway, down into the yard where their children were playing in the golden evening light. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Hannah lay in bed with Nathan's arm around her, listening to the peaceful sounds of their home. The creak of settling wood, the whisper of wind through the trees, the distant hoot of an owl. These were the sounds of her life now, of safety and love and belonging. "Nathan," she said softly. He sounded half asleep. "Thank you," Hannah said, "for everything. For saving me, for loving me, for building this life with me." Nathan pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead. "Thank you for choosing me," he replied, "for taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing but love to offer." "Love is everything," Hannah said. "I know that now." In the years that followed, their love only deepened. They grew old together, watching their children grow up and have families of their own. James became a teacher, sharing his mother's love of learning. Catherine married a doctor and moved to Richmond, though she visited often with Hannah's grandchildren. Robert took over the farm, working the land his father had claimed, and his parents had built into something prosperous and good. Hannah's lending library became a permanent fixture in Williamsburg, eventually moving to its own building that Nathan helped construct. She became known throughout the county as a woman of wisdom and kindness, someone who helped others the way she had once needed help. Nathan remained the steady, loving man he had always been, devoted to his family, respected in the community. He never spoke of heroism or bravery, never claimed credit for saving Hannah. But everyone who knew them understood that they had saved each other in all the ways that mattered. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the church, with neighbors and friends coming from all over the county to celebrate. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and speeches about the Owens family and what they meant to the community. When it was Nathan's turn to speak, he simply took Hannah's hand and looked into her eyes. "25 years ago, I made a choice to help someone in need," he said. "I did not know then that she would become my whole world. I did not know that she would give me children and a home and a love deeper than I had ever imagined possible. All I knew was that she needed help, and I was able to give it. But the truth is, she helped me just as much. She taught me what it means to be brave, to stand up for what is right, to choose love over fear. Hannah Owens, you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would ride through 1,000 snowstorms to find you again." There was not a dry eye in the room when he finished, and Hannah kissed him to applause and cheers. "You are not getting rid of me now," she said, smiling through her tears. "You are stuck with me forever." "Forever sounds perfect," Nathan replied. They lived to see their grandchildren grow, to hold their great-grandchildren, to celebrate 50 years of marriage in that same church where they had wed. Their hair turned gray and then white, their steps slowed, but the love between them never dimmed. When Hannah was 72, she fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. Nathan sat by her bedside day and night, holding her hand, talking to her, reminding her of all the beautiful moments they had shared. Their children and grandchildren came to visit, filling the house with life and love. On a quiet February morning, with snow falling softly outside the window and Nathan's hand warm in hers, Hannah opened her eyes and smiled at her husband. "I have had such a good life," she whispered. "Thank you for giving it to me." "You gave it to yourself," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "You were brave enough to leave, brave enough to choose love, brave enough to build something beautiful. I just got to be part of it." "The best part," Hannah said. She closed her eyes, still smiling, and slipped peacefully away. Nathan mourned her deeply, but he did not fall apart. She would not have wanted that. He continued to live in their house, surrounded by memories and family. He told his grandchildren stories about their grandmother, about the brave young woman who had refused to let anyone control her fate, who had chosen love and built a legacy of kindness and strength. He lived for 5 more years, long enough to see all of his great-grandchildren born, long enough to know that the family he and Hannah had created would continue for generations. When he died quietly in his sleep at the age of 82, his family buried him next to Hannah in the small cemetery outside Williamsburg, their headstones side by side, united in death as they had been in life. On Hannah's headstone, their children had carved a simple inscription that captured everything. She chose love, and love chose her back. And on Nathan's, he saved her, and she saved him. Their story became legend in Williamsburg and the surrounding county, passed down through generations. The house they built still stood, occupied by their descendants, a testament to what 2 people could create when they chose each other. The library Hannah started continued to serve the community, expanded and modernized but still bearing her name. And on cold winter nights, when the snow fell heavy and white, people would tell the story of the cowboy who rode through a blizzard to save a young woman from a cruel fate, and how that single act of courage had rippled out to touch countless lives. They would speak of love that was chosen, not forced, a family built on respect and kindness rather than obligation and control. They would remember Hannah and Nathan Owens, and they would know that true love was not just something that happened to you. It was something you fought for, chose every day, built with your own hands into something that would outlast you both. And in that way, Hannah and Nathan lived forever, not just in the memories of their descendants, but in the example they set of what it meant to love truly, completely, and well.